Do you know your grandfather's name? How about your great-grandfather? Great-great-grandfather? After reading far and wide, I found a family tree I felt was the greatest in Africa, or at least in Nigeria. The family tree we'll be talking about today is the lineage of Alaafin Abiodun. Alaafin Abiodun was the 29th Alaafin of Oyo. He was a direct descendant of Oromiyan, the first king of Oyo, also the first Oba of Benin, and the last son of Udua. He is most remembered for defeating the tyrant prime minister of Oyo, Basharunga, who had killed four successive kings before him, and was also responsible for the death of his daughter, Ajayi. The story starts out boring. What is truly special about the descendants of Alaafin Abiodun is how much they would shape the story of Nigeria. One of Alaafin Abiodun's sons is called Alaafin Atiba. He is responsible for relocating the capital of Yoruba land to the current location, popularly referred to as Oyo Atiba. In fact, the current Oyo is in a local government called Atiba Local Government. The capital was relocated because in 1835, the old capital Oyo Igbo was sacked by the Fulani jihadists from Ilorin. The tales of Oba Abiodun tells the proverbial story of how even children of kings can become slaves. It is on record that at least three of his children were enslaved at one time. One of them is called Bevindo, you guessed right. He was enslaved and sent to Brazil, where he later regained his freedom. The second one is called Henry Johnson. Once again, you're right. He was enslaved and sent to Sierra Leone. He is also the father of Samuel Johnson and Obadiah Johnson. The third is a lady called Afala, later christened as Anna. She is the mother of Samuel Ajayi Crowther. The last person worthy of a mention is Agbonrin, the woman killed by Basharunga. She is also the mother of Bashorun Oluyole, the famous Bashorun of Ibadan. The first person we will look at is Candido Galvao. He was the son of the enslaved Bevindo. His father was enslaved and taken to Brazil, and Galvao is popularly referred to as Don Omoba II de Africa. He was a veteran of many wars for Brazil. Galvao is well remembered for being one of the first men of African descent to start to demand for respect and equal rights for Africans in Brazil. He was a close associate of Emperor Pedro II, the last emperor of Brazil. He was a native of Bahia, an area in Brazil known to have the highest number of West African slaves. Bishop Samuel Ajayi Crowther. Where does one start with this phenomenal man? Samuel Ajayi Crowther's family were captured by slave raiders when he was only 12 years old. He was a grandson of Alaafin Abiodun through his mother, Afala. Young Samuel and his family were freed by the Royal British Navy and resettled in Freetown, Sierra Leone. He returned back to Nigeria in 1841 as a CMS missionary. Some of his achievements include being the first student admitted into Faraday College, being the first African ordained as a bishop. He compiled the first Yoruba dictionary. He was the first to translate the Bible into Yoruba. He created the first primer for Igbo language in 1857. He created a similar primer for Nupe language in 1960 and a full grammar and literature book 4 years later. He was also highly influential in ending slave trade in Nigeria, being responsible for giving the speech to the Queen of England that led to the end of Obakosoko. He died at the prime age of 82 and is buried at Ajele Cemetery in Lagos. One of the grandsons of Alaafin Abiodun is Alaafin Adeyemi I. He was the Alaafin during the 16 years long Kiriji War, also known as Ekiti Parapọ. This war is quite important in Yoruba history. It's a war between Western Yoruba and Eastern Yoruba. Alaafin Adeyemi I would also be remembered as the last independent ruler of Oyo Empire before British colonialism. Another influential grandson of Alaafin Abiodun is Bashorun Oluyole. Ibadan is popularly referred to as Ibadan, Ile Oluyole, meaning Ibadan, the home of Oluyole. He was the son of Agbonrin, the daughter of Alaafin Abiodun. Oluyole was made the Ariago of Ibadan. He later created a position for himself he referred to as the Osikankafo, the third in command of the Ibadan army. After defeating the Egbas, the Fulanis, and the Daumis in different wars, he was later crowned the Oloye Basharu, a title that made him the military leader of Ibadan and the prime minister of Oyo. The first of the great grandchildren of Alaafin Abiodun we will look at is Samuel Johnson. Samuel Johnson was an Anglican priest and historian. His family was captured in the transatlantic slave trade, but fortunately was rerouted to Sierra Leone. He was educated through CMS and was fortunate to be one of the very influential men and put an end to the 100-year-long civil war of the Yorubas. It is proverbial that he would come back from slavery to be responsible for ending a war that started as far back as when his great-grandfather was king. He is also the writer of the primer Yoruba historic book titled The History of Yorubas from the earliest time to the beginning of the British Protectorate, which he completed in 1897. Sadly, the manuscripts were lost and it was reworked after. Obadiah Johnson was the younger brother of Samuel Johnson. He was also the second Nigerian to qualify as a medical doctor in 1886. He is also the co-author of the History of the Yoruba people, having been the one that reworked the book after the death of his brother while the manuscript was lost. What makes this book really unique is that it's the one story we can all trust. It's different from the oral stories of how my father told my father's fathers. Nah, this one is a story written by people that were actually present when these things happened. Next is Archdeacon Denderson Crowther, the last son of Samuel Ajayi Crowther. He was one of the first educated African missionaries. He was made the Archdeacon of the Niger Delta. Also worthy of note is Abigail Crowther, daughter of Samuel Ajayi Crowther, wife to Babinti Macaulay, the founder and first principal of the first secondary school in Nigeria, CMS Grammar School Bariga, and mother to Herbert Macaulay. Lastly, we have Alaafin Adeyemi II. He was the Alaafin just before independence. He's said to have had over 200 wives, but the biggest gist about Alaafin Adeyemi II was perhaps his fight with popular politician Bode Thomas. Rumors are they had a fight because Bode Thomas disrespected him and he told Bode Thomas to go home and bark like a dog. Well, Bode Thomas fell ill that night and was pronounced dead a few days later. Due to these rumors, Obafemi Awolowo, premier of Western Nigeria at that time, exiled him to Lagos and he was removed as king. One of the heirs produced in the next generation, of course, is Sir Herbert Macaulay, popularly known as the father of Nigerian nationalism. Herbert was a politician, surveyor, engineer, architect, journalist, and musician. I know, right? In 1944, Herbert co-founded the National Council for Nigerians and Cameroonians together with Nnamdi Azikiwe and became its president. This was one of the foremost organizations that called for the independence of Nigeria. He is also the first Nigerian to own a car. Actually, the first African to own a car. He is today immortalized on the 1 naira notes and coin. If you live in Lagos, then you have probably heard of the name Bode Thomas, the popular road that will lead you home. Sir Bode Thomas was a Nigerian lawyer, politician, statesman, and traditional aristocrat. He served as a colonial minister and a privy councillor of the historic Oyo Kingdom. He was also Nigeria's first minister of transportation. He was called to the bar in 1942. In 1948, together with Chief Frederick Rotimi Williams and Chief Remilekun Fani Kayode, he set up a Nigerian law firm called Thomas Williams and Kayode, which was by far the finest law chamber in the country then. He was regarded as a very brilliant man, but quite arrogant, which led to a strained relationship with popular figures like Sir Ahmadu Bello and Alaafin Adeyemi II, his distant relative. He was a founding member of Action Group and was considered to be the brain behind Obafemi Awolowo. He had a mysterious death after a fight with Alaafin Adeyemi II. Coming in with the 6th generation is the Ikuba Bayeye, Alaafin Lamidi Olayiwola Adeyemi III. He succeeded Alaafin Gbadigesin Ladigbolu II in 1970, just after the Civil War. He was Chancellor of Uthman Danfodio University in Sokoto from 1980 to 1992, and in 2001, President Muhammad Buhari appointed him as the Chancellor of the University of Maiduguri. He was one of such king that redefined the power that comes with the throne of Oyo and returned the glory of the throne, making it as majestic as it has always been in times past. Another member of this elite group is Modupe Omo Ebo, a Nigerian lawyer and jurist who was Nigeria's first female judge. Her mother was the granddaughter of Lagos aristocrat Oshodi Takpa, and she was a great-granddaughter of Bishop Samuel Ajayi Crowther. Herbert Macaulay was her maternal great-uncle. Omo Ebo's husband was also a judge of the Court of Appeal in Edo State. And lastly, for this generation, we have Olivia Ogedengbe Macaulay. He was a Nigerian politician, journalist, public relation consultant, and private secretary to Obade Mikao Yekon. He also served as the assistant secretary to the NCNC, a political party founded by his father, Herbert Macaulay, and was actively involved in the struggle for independence. In fact, he was jailed for it. For the seventh generation, we have Babatunde Kwaku Adadevo, a Nigerian physician, educational administrator, and former vice chancellor of the University of Lagos, Nigeria. He was a professor of chemical pathology and was born to a Ghanaian father and Sarah Abigail Idowu Macaulay, daughter of Sir Herbert Macaulay. And for the eighth and final generation on the list, we have Ameyo Stella Adadevo, daughter of Babatunde Adadevo. She was a Nigerian physician most known for preventing the Nigerian index case of Ebola virus from leaving the hospital at time of diagnosis. She was also the first to alert the Nigerian Ministry of Health when swine flu spread to Nigeria in 2012. She herself eventually paid the ultimate price to Ebola virus, but she was responsible for saving thousands of lives. She was a grandniece of Sir Nnamdi Azikiwe and a great-great-granddaughter of Sarah Forbes Bonita, the adopted daughter of Queen Elizabeth I.